Hi, folks. Welcome back to Kitchen Table Politics. I'm your host, Jeremy Massengale. This is the podcast where we all sit around the kitchen table and discuss political ideas. We're going to take a short break for one of our sponsors, and then we're going to get to the interview. Thanks for listening. This episode is brought to you by Amazon.com. Do you like shopping online and supporting political dialogue? Well, Kitchen Table Politics and Amazon.com has partnered up so that you can do both at the same time with no additional cost to you. Here's how it works. Go to ktpolitics.com and click on the Amazon tab. Then shop on Amazon just like you intended. Amazon will give the show a small portion of the proceeds. It's that simple. Again, it doesn't cost you anything extra, so you are supporting the show just by shopping as you normally would. Now please enjoy the rest of the show. With us is Joshua Eckel.
Hey.
And Justin Cornett. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very pleased to be with you today. What are we going to talk about?
I think we should give you an introduction to libertarianism. But before we do that, we should probably give you an introduction to ourselves, kind of, because I'm the Knox County chair for Libertarian Party. And Justin?
I'm Loudoun County chair.
So what exactly does that mean?
So right now we're running the day-to-day operations of the party. It's a volunteer position. We're basically just kind of managing it in the state. We've started doing this about 6 months ago, and this is a completely new thing for both of us. We were both Republicans before this, and the advent of Donald Trump was kind of the reason we decided to leave the party and go try a new mechanism for change.
Once Rand Paul was gone, there were no other options.
Yeah.
Right.
We were big Rand Paul supporters. But more than anything, libertarianism, we've found a lot of traction out here in East Tennessee. We didn't expect to see as much as we did, but what we found is people in the East, they tend to like the government out of their checkbook, out of their pocketbook. They like to have lower taxes, but they're also pretty moderately socially liberal people. They believe
me alone.
Exactly, yeah. They believe the government should stay out of your life, and you should be free to do what you want to do. And that, for that reason, I think libertarianism's been had a lot of traction out here in the last several months.
And it is a party of small government, which is something that the Republican Party used to stand for, at least in concept and principle. It's smaller government at the very minimum. Because of that message and the presentation that we've tried to take in sharing this with the public, we've also gotten really good reception from a lot of representatives that have come and spoke to us. We've had Jimmy Duncan out. We've had Tim Burchett out. We've had a good handful of representatives, including Mr. Dunn, Mr. Daniel.
Glenn Jacobs.
Jacobs has been a speaker at our meetings. I mean, we've got Andrew Ogles with Americans for Prosperity next month, and Jeremy Faison as speakers for this coming meeting on the 23rd, which you are all invited to. I think that they see us as a group of people that they can get some traction with some of these more anti-establishment causes that have been put off by the dominant powers in government for long periods of time, and they do trickle down to more individual freedom and less intervention in your life by government.
The kind of legislation that we've supported is fit that trend. So, representatives like Jeremy Faison, who brought legislation such as the medical marijuana bill that he's hoping to get passed this cycle. We've gotten behind that, and we're obviously very anti-gas tax.
Martin Daniel has a civil asset forfeiture bill, from what we understand, that might be coming up as well.
There's
right. A few pieces of legislation that he has that seem interesting to us. But
the most critical thing, I think, when it comes to libertarians in Tennessee, though, right now we're one of the few states in the union that don't have ballot access. So you go to most states in the South, most states around us, and you'll see libertarians on the ballot. So you'll see Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green, whatever that may be. The threshold to get that in the state of Tennessee is 35,000 signatures. So it's a percentage of the votes cast in a gubernatorial race, the last gubernatorial race. And that is a very, very high number. Now, we've gotten, from what I understand, close to 10,000, and we're still not able to be recognized. So when our candidates run, we're recognized as an independent. We don't even have party recognition. So we have a piece of legislation that should be introduced to the General Assembly this session that's going to take that requirement from 35,000 down to 5,000. And today, I mean, for us, that's the first thing and most important thing we need to support, because without getting full ballot access and recognition for the party, we're kind of trapped and locked out of the system.
And this isn't something that's just about the Libertarian Party, in all fairness, either. Of course, we have a political philosophy and we think that we're right and you guys are wrong, of course. But we also are firm believers in the free market of ideas. And lowering this threshold makes it easy for anybody that wants to have a voice, easier for any person that wants to have a voice, to be able to get in and say their piece and try to shift the needle one way or another. 5,000 votes is not, I'm just going to go down to the courthouse and get on the ballot. You still got to have 5,000 signatures.
That falls a lot in line with something we saw a few weeks ago with, I believe it was a judge that decided that Gary Johnson had not been treated fairly in the debates. So they made a ruling on that. So that might make that fairer.
There's going to be an imbalance. And we as a smaller party do recognize that. So, I mean, we're not even pushing for an equal access bill because it's absurd. It's not going to pass. Those people don't want to relinquish the control. You know, what we're hoping for is that we can get an achievable threshold is all it is.
Yeah.
You said you've had an increase in the party size lately. What do you think it is that's driving that increase?
So a lot of it, I think, is this anti-immigrant and I'd say protectionist, especially when it comes to fiscal policy, this fondness towards tariffs, this idea that taxation is okay in certain contexts as long as it promotes American values. There's a lot of things that I feel like the Republican Party says. They say they stand for small government. They say they stand for fiscal responsibility, but in application, they don't do that. And I think that hypocrisy is being recognized by the electorate now. And I saw it was more right before Donald Trump got elected. So it was when he was getting close to clinching the nomination for me that I realized where the party was headed, and that those traits exemplified through Donald Trump, they just don't align up with Republican values. And so we looked for another mechanism there.
I would add that I think that a large part of it is the same general wave of sentiment that helped get Donald Trump elected that brings us people. Donald Trump was elected in large part on a wave of anti-establishment feeling, a change. Some people wanted a wrecking ball. Some people thought that he was a godsend and he was going to fix everything. And who knows which one's right, because there's no predicting the man. Particularly in East Tennessee, you have very independent people. These are descendants of moonshiners. These are people that want people out of their lives. You know what I mean? Sure. So you have a big anti-establishment feel here, and people don't trust Donald Trump. And, you know, with libertarianism, it is a very broad philosophy that can be argued absolutely truthfully so that it does end in anarchism. Okay. But the message that Josh and I try to preach is,
and to clarify what you mean by that is you mean the principles end in anarchism.
The principles will end in anarchism over time, of course. But the realistic part of this is you can't go from a civilization that's dependent on the government to a benevolent civilization that cares really wonderfully or more than anything about their neighbor more than themselves, so you can have a society where you don't have to have rule because everybody loves everybody else more than themselves. Because that's the only way that anarchism is actually going to end up working. So the goal is to drive it as close to that individual sovereignty as you can get it. And the message that Josh and I try to preach is, let's go to the Constitution. Let's look to constitutional originalism as a place to start all other conversations. And I think that resonates in a patriotic area of the country that's anti-establishment.
Because we do get that a lot. We get people that say, well, libertarians, aren't you guys for no government? And well, in principle, if you take libertarianism to its absolute extreme, that may be where you go. But we believe that, incrementalism, one step at a time, If you push towards a system of anarchism, you will end up with a smaller government, less taxation, more freedom in your life.
And it's an opposite end. It's a utopian idea. The thing is with all governments, hearts and minds are very crucial into the effectiveness of any kind of government, whatever it might be. The hearts and minds in this country are not ready for anything like anarchism. It's not a realistic thing. It has to be a benevolent society to achieve that, or the opposite end of the spectrum, the benevolent communist commune where everybody loves each other and there's 10 people that make all the perfect right decisions for everybody on the planet. Both are utopian and not real.
Yeah, fairy tales.
There's this idea of this benevolent society that libertarians are marching towards in theory, but libertarians come under criticism for not caring about other people. That's something that you hear from the left a lot. They're callous, they don't want to help people. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, for sure. So libertarianism, I think the reason they get that rep is because what we spoke about. The people that are far of that extreme anarchist wing, they believe in abolishment of all government. They're the loud voice in the party. They're the extreme voice in the party. And what they do to people is they turn people off. So this goes back to our idea. So we don't believe you can have a society without a social safety net. We don't believe that you can have a functional system of government without some means for,
Currently,
sure. So I guess, all right, that goes back to our entire approach here. So the entire approach is if you take the principled idea, small government, less taxation, and more freedom to the individual, what you end up with is a better society. Now, we don't in any way advocate completely removing an entire social safety net whatsoever.
You have to have a people that can exist without a social safety net before you pull the social safety net out from underneath them, or you have carnage. So you have to recondition the people in order to be independent and allow the society to make mistakes so that it can evolve and become a better society. It's biology applied to politics. You get less mutation in a small little box where it doesn't have room to grow as opposed to, the Amazon rainforest. It's the same kind of thing. If you put the people in a box, they have no room to evolve and grow as a society. But the principle is, like we say, cut government. As of right now, the United States government spends roughly $3.8 trillion a year. Okay, that is almost double what China spends on 7 times the population in a communist dictatorship. Okay, and Bernie Sanders was wanting to raise it by $2 trillion more, and Hillary Clinton was wanting to go 1.2, and Donald Trump would only go 800 billion. And Gary Johnson, let's cut it across the board 20%. The man and I didn't agree on a whole lot of stuff, but 20% across the board is a big positive step in the right direction in this country. Bigger than most things you can do if you could choose one thing.
And if we had an actual libertarian in office elected, I don't believe that you would see a complete removal of all social programs. It wouldn't be possible.
You can't. The way the government works doesn't allow it.
And I think in a lot of ways what you'll see, and this is kind of what drew me to it, because I do feel that I am a little bit from the left in some ways. And I can see some things that they say that bring value. But the truth of the matter is when you look at it, the libertarians can bring a different approach to looking at these systems. So I've heard libertarian arguments for the universal basic income. I've heard libertarian arguments to completely tweak the nature of the way welfare works. And I think if you continue to vote R or D, you're going to get the same old. You're going to get either cut or expansion. And I think the exciting thing about the Libertarian Party is that they have fresh approaches and new ideas to issues that we've been stuck on for years. So that was
I would argue that they're much more responsive to their constituents than the 2 major parties.
Josh, you and I can talk about the universal basic income probably on a later podcast.
Sure.
That would probably take a whole hour of talking just to scratch the surface of that. This podcast is about new ideas. I agree with you both that the way we're doing things is not working. We have to stop looking at intentions and start looking at results. And the results that we've experienced over the last 50 years
are atrocious.
They're atrocious. They're not working. I do welcome the idea of other people's visions for the country because the way we're doing it is not working. You could go so far as to start a benevolent fund from the U.S. government. You could say, okay, everybody on the left claims that we have to have social programs by the government because nobody else will provide those services. Well, the people on the right say that, well, we're not going to provide those services because the government already is, and we're not doing it twice. We have to do something one way or the other. We can't just keep doing it the same way that we're doing it.
Right.
What if we started a benevolent fund and we contributed to that fund for a year and did everything possible to gain as much money as possible and then not spend that money next year by the government?
What if we gave a huge tax incentive to charitable organizations that would serve a certain purpose instead of a tax break to Exxon?
Or what if we made it legal for companies to give their food to homeless people? I mean, we have restaurants and food banks.
Trucks.
These people are literally throwing away good edible food. But that's just one small thing.
What if we made it legal for people to get a job braiding hair in the state of Tennessee without having to do 50 hours of classes or something like that? And pay how much on a fee to get a license? I don't even know. I mean, if you free up the people and let them do things to get paid, then they can make money. And if you encourage charity through taxes, people will use it.
A true free market gives people the ability to enter it, make money, and climb the ladder.
I mean, that's what was there before. We had gigantic banks and gigantic insurance companies. There were small secret societies that helped out communities and, made sure people had places to live and everything else. I mean,
I don't know if that's a rational argument for today's. I mean, now I do want to go back to that though.
Get there.
So can you clarify? Is there a pitch on the books? I haven't even heard of this idea of a benevolent fund. Are you?
No, that's just something I'm just throwing out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your idea is on a federal level, we go and give people the ability to donate.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Sure.
Okay.
You could have celebrity.
Plead to the Hollywood.
You could have, these celebrities that are always talking about we're not doing enough. Right. Why not have a telethon 4 times a year to where all the money that they raise goes straight into that fund? And we start with housing and food. We spend $110 billion currently on food stamps and Section 8 housing right now.
Right.
That's an attainable goal for this country to reach on their own without force.
It is.
So there's lots of ideas to go in any direction.
Yes.
Yeah, you could do that. And, this goes back to what we did on a local level. So remember the Sevierville fires where when Gatlinburg had all that happen, there was an outpouring of support. People were there helping. We had a charity drive. We raised hundreds of dollars for these kids and people came out on their own accord.
Lots of food and supplies. It had people out there donating their time, helping do organize stuff. I mean,
it just blows me away that people they can do that. And I think you're right. If you take that principle and scale it up, there's a lot of potential there, and it needs to be explored. I'd like to see somebody come up with something like that or some sort of pitch. I don't even know if you need the federal government to make that happen. To be honest,
I don't think you do.
People doing it. It's just about nice people participating.
It is. I completely disagree with Bernie Sanders. Several weeks ago, during one of the confirmation hearings, he said that the United States is not a compassionate people. And Rand Paul set him straight very quickly. That's insane.
I agree.
We are very compassionate people, but I think it's distribution at this point that's the problem.
It is.
Not the giving.
Well, you know how much we raised the Red Cross raised a record-breaking amount of money for the people that were victims of the Haitian earthquake. It was the most money raised from what I remember at the time ever for an event of that nature. And now, years and years later, that money went to multinational corporations to build complexes and launder the money in ways that didn't even help the people in those cities. Now, that's a outside of the United States analogy, but that's the problem. Is that the distribution, you can get the money, you might be able to get the money, but the organizations that are involved in giving that out, it's a counterproductive system, and it doesn't seem to work in application. So I'd like to see somebody come up with someone, or at least another organization take that
there are lots
mantle.
Of counter examples to that as well, though. I mean, but anytime your government gets involved in distributing charity or any of that, it's going to get
messy.
Yes.
Messy. Yeah.
Yes. Oil for food, maybe.
Right. What is the focus of the Libertarian Party in East Tennessee right now?
Growth.
And if we're talking about, if we're going to go over talking points, ballot access. That is the number one thing that we're pushing right now.
And getting people on the ballot.
Yeah. So, we can't really have our name recognized until we can run Libertarians in this state. And right now we can't do that. And it's said to be prohibitive for our entry. That's a big part of it, though. But I think one thing I'm really excited about, and stuff that I can get on the same page with Republicans on. Martin Daniels about to introduce a piece of legislation that's going to, from what I understand, ban civil asset forfeiture from, I think, a dollar amount's under, is it 40?
50,000 is what I
Okay, there's $40,000 or $50,000.
somewhere around there.
Civil asset forfeiture is a massive issue, and it's something that I don't hear. It's not a sexy issue. It's not something I hear a lot of people talking about, but it's extremely important, and it's a gross violation of our constitutional rights to have a police officer pull you over and take your assets or your income or your money out of the car without being convicted of a crime. And I think that's just counter to our entire Constitution.
Yes.
So I'm extremely excited to see where that goes.
I think somebody had a bill to do the for every one regulation, you got to repeal two too.
On a state level?
On a state level.
I did not hear about that, but that'd be interesting as well. I could get behind supporting that as well. But
Constitutional carry.
I've heard about constitutional carry. That's also something that we're excited about. But really, we're trying to look for people to run. We're trying to raise money. We're trying to grow. And
Get on the ballot.
Get on the ballot is the first thing we need to do to make that happen.
Growth here has been and continues to be actually gaining momentum. We were really afraid that it would drop off right after the election with all the crazies, and stuff. But it's actually gained traction since then.
It has.
The last meeting that we had 41 people, which was the largest meeting that we have had so far. And we're actually expecting better turnout for this next meeting based on the guests. We've
been raising money, which is something that other chapters in the state cannot say.
We're starting to expand into smaller county meetings. We've been doing a big combined meeting in Knoxville, and we're starting to do satellite meetings in the smaller counties. We're added a few chairs recently. We're looking at adding a couple other chairs in a couple other counties, getting meetings going there. I mean, in 6 months, we started putting 41 people in a meeting. My first try in Loudoun County is coming this month, and I'm expecting 15 to 20 for that meeting.
Sevierville's first meeting will be in March. Monroe County will be having a meeting, from what I understand, at the end of March. Anderson County is going to be throwing a meeting here soon. So there's a lot of local chapters popping up now. It's not just the group of the ETNLP or the East Tennessee Libertarian Party in the East as it's been for the last 6 months. It's branching out, and I'm getting pretty excited to see where that's going.
Let's go back to the civil forfeitures just a moment. Something I have noticed is there's a lot of amendments that are in the public eye a lot. The First Amendment, of course. The Second Amendment is probably the largest, but I think the one that's under the most fire is actually the Fourth Amendment, and that's what no one ever talks about.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Because it doesn't affect us on a daily basis like the others do as much. The asset forfeitures is one. The Patriot Act, I think it's the Freedom Act now.
Yep.
Those are completely against the Fourth Amendment. Do you think there's actually more attention being paid to that now? Is it finally coming around to where people are rejecting that idea?
So the reason that I got involved in politics in 2013 was because of the Snowden leaks. Mm-hmm. So I remember, I think it was The Guardian had this interview with Snowden in which he said, what we assumed was science fiction is now reality. The fact that is the government surveils every single American and has their phone records and their internet history and can track you as much as they want without any warrant whatsoever, without a legitimate warrant. So the Fourth Amendment, I think what we need to realize is that our digital information needs to fall under the same protections as our physical information under the Fourth Amendment. And we're at a critical moment in history right now, because if we let this slip through our fingers and we let the establishment define what it constitutes property as it pertains to the Fourth Amendment, and they define digital information as in the public domain, we're going to see a massive and even more extreme violation of our rights as time progresses, as things become more digital, as our lives become more inseparable from technology. And it horrifies me. It's one of the most important issues. I completely agree with you.
Can you tell he's my tech guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I would argue actually no. I think that there's a handful that come to us, and that's exactly their number one priority. And there's a lot of people that come to us for a lot of different reasons, but that's not always the number one priority. I think the government's fear machine has been incredibly effective over the last few decades. And I've got family members that I can't convince that they're not going to get shot walking down the street by somebody that has a different color skin in some cases. I mean, and it's not, I don't think it's racist. I think it's it's conditioning.
You're
You
okay
have to
with
empower the people, and the government doesn't like empowered people. Government fears empowered people. All governments fear empowered people. The Constitution was set up where it was supposed to be about empowered people running their own government for themselves, we the people. Okay, but that's not what we get.
the propaganda machine has
is.
worked very well on this. And I think for the Fourth Amendment specifically, when people are scared of a threat, when people feel like the government needs to have more authority to understand, quote, what's going on so that they can stop it, I think that's why the Fourth Amendment issue has not caught on nearly as much as it should. And it's fear that's driving that whole thing. Now, I don't know exactly what we can do as citizens to wake people up to this issue. What I've tried to do, I set up a website, recuro.org, recuro.org, that's tried to fight against this specifically. It's one of the most important issues, but I mean, it feels like it's hard to educate people on this. I feel like people don't even care. The question I hear is, if I'm doing nothing wrong, why do I care if the government listens to my phone calls or reads my internet history? And that scares me that people have that as their gut reaction to this, because it's about innocent until you're proven guilty. And it's about freedom of privacy, especially
apparently,
on the internet.
Legislation of late says that it's about the NSA being able to contact your local police department and just let you know where you're going to happen to be at if you're, buying a dime bag of pot somewhere, and you can just drop in and ask them why they're in the parking lot, and then ask to search the car and do reconstruction of the scene, and that's what they're coaching people to do these days, apparently. So,
yeah, and I mean, the Libertarian stance on that specifically, but it's a very horrifying prospect in our opinion. So.
Right.
I mean, we've had many people throughout our history talk about encroachments on government being coming in as like a Trojan horse, with being afraid of a foreign enemy or something along those lines. From the founders to the Eisenhowers to the Kennedys of the world. I mean, throughout our history, those lines are there, and nobody seems to be listening. I mean, all we can do is hope that we can make some people listen, I guess.
On the subject of fear, I think it's something people have been conditioned to, especially after 9/11.
Yeah.
And I can understand that fear, because we didn't understand what was going on at that time. Right. We just knew that 3,000 people died suddenly.
Right.
After 16 years, though, I think we have a better understanding of what is happening. Mm-hmm. There is no reason for us to be in the Middle East.
Nope. Well, if we were going to go in, we should have gone into Saudi Arabia, which was we've been fighting a war for no reason, in my opinion, for the last 15 years.
I'm different on foreign policy than a lot of libertarians. Let me go ahead and get that out there. All you libertarians that might listen to this, I don't disagree that realistically we should not be in the Middle East. We are in the Middle East, though. We've been in the Middle East for a long time. We've been meddling in it for a long time. We've been trying to keep peace between 100 different factions, which is absolutely impossible, and it's costing us a small fortune of our treasure.
Small fortune.
So,
fortune.
Realistically, you got three options, and I'm not going to sit here and try to declare which one is the right option, but you have three options. You can keep doing what you're doing. You can pull the carpet out from underneath everybody and just let the chips fall where they may, which we all know is going to result in lots and lots of bloodshed. Or you can pick a horse and make sure your horse wins, which is also going to result in a lot of bloodshed.
Right. I don't disagree with you. I'm a very firm believer in the Powell doctrine. You don't send in 50,000 troops. You send in 500,000 troops, and you get the job done quickly.
You're going to do it.
If you're going to do it,
do it or don't do it.
Right. Mm-hmm. We've conditioned the United States, though, now, after all this time of war, these small, I don't want to make light of the deaths that have happened in terrorist attacks since 9/11, but realistically, with 300 million people, they are small.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 or 4 people with handguns, concealed carry people, could have stopped most of those.
Yes.
Yep.
We have conditioned the American people to be scared of guns.
Yes.
When just, again, 3 or 4 people could have stopped most of this stuff.
Completely agreed.
I mean, we had that shooting at the Marine Recruiting Center in Chattanooga, and they weren't allowed to have guns. People getting shot at a Marine Recruiting Center,
right,
where they can't have guns because they're Marines and they can't be trusted with weapons.
Right.
Yeah, that's just the idea. Is, I mean, A gun empowers somebody. Why would the federal government want you to feel empowered? Why would they want you to feel safe? They need you to rely on them, not the other way around. Right. So when you give them a gun, it gives somebody their power, and that's why the founders wrote it into the Constitution.
That's it.
So we believe that's critical to bringing back security and safety to the United States. I think you're going to accomplish so much more by expanding the realm of the Second Amendment than you will by banning Muslim immigrants.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree 1,000%.
And I think that's...
Let them come and let us protect them. Let us protect ourselves.
If I'm armed, I'm not worried about Muslim immigrants.
Right.
So.
Well, if we're armed, there won't be any terrorists coming.
There you go.
Nope. I've heard many stories coming out of Nazi Germany to where they did not attack the United States because they knew we were all armed.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, there would be a gun under every blade of grass, as they say. So, if you invade mainland America, you've got a huge challenge on your hands because you have an army and then you have the entire population.
Yep.
So it's the best thing about our country. I had a friend of mine who is from Tasmania, Australia, and he was talking to me about how you can't even have a knife. You can't even have a bat in your car, and how carjackings are going crazy in certain areas of Australia because people can't defend themselves. They'll have someone pull up to the back of them, pull out a bat, and then you're completely helpless.
But bats are illegal.
Yeah, that's right. Who would have thought? You can still get a bat while they're illegal. Exactly. That's the entire problem.
My friends on the left will not enjoy this podcast. But I still love you all anyways.
Well, I know some leftists that believe in the Second Amendment. A few of them, but I understand completely.
We just don't trust. I just don't trust anybody else to protect me but me. Time and time again, it's been proven that if you trust somebody else to protect you, you're going to end up not being protected.
Not being protected or taken advantage of.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
it's funny. Think about it. And again, my friends on the left are not going to like this part of it, but there's this idea that to make someone have a voter ID card is to infringe on them. It's putting an undue burden on them to buy an ID, which is what, $10 probably.
Right.
But the left will require them to pay $500 for a gun permit to protect themselves.
It's kind of a hypocritical position.
It is a hypocritical position.
I don't disagree. I'm not a big voter ID fan myself, but I completely agree with you. That supporting that and then it makes no sense to me.
They serve two different purposes, though. I mean, the gun part is conditioning and fear mongering and making sure that the society is subdued. And voter ID is if there's a face that you have on a card, then the people that are not supposed to be voting for their party don't vote for their party because they can't. So I mean, it's all about empowering that one particular group of that party, and
it's a lot of self-service.
So much of it is, and that's the problem. George Washington told us we would get to this point where two factions would fight amongst themselves for power instead of the best interest of the people, and that's exactly where we're at. Every 4 years, there's a conversation about which party just died because they want one party rule. That's what happens when one party dies. So all of you left and right people who want one party to die, you're advocating tyranny.
Yeah,
I just want you to think about
that's
that.
Actually
for 2
a really
seconds.
good point.
All we're advocating for is a little bit more of an option.
That's really it. We just want we want more diversity of thought in politics because we believe that the one thing politics is lacking right now is new ideas, fresh approaches.
And we also think the Libertarian Party is a really good vessel for good ideas. It's not convoluted with the old men in suits and blue hairs that have been there for years and years and years and tell you what you can and cannot think in their party. Mm-hmm. This is a party where the market of ideas and the battlefield of ideas actually is a place where conversations take place and results come from.
Agreed.
At least they're starting to now that we're involved.
Right. Well, that's true. But what you said a few minutes ago, and then in episode 3 of this podcast, my friend Christian King and I talked about racism, and one of the things we talked about was that the civil rights movement did not start in the government. Mm-mm. It started in the streets in Alabama,
Absolutely.
or in the schoolhouses in the
Absolutely.
South. It didn't start in the government. The government came later after the people decided that's where we're going.
Right.
So even though the Libertarian Party, these ideas are coming forth, it's not a party necessarily that's going to get those ideas started. It starts with the people. So we have to go across those party lines, and all of us come up with some ideas that will work so that everybody, maybe not everybody gets everything that they want, but we can at least compromise enough to where we make progress.
So that's the biggest problem, I think, with libertarians today. And this goes back to our conversation about anarchy. I mean, it is the party of principle, right? And so what you find is they use principle to a degree that it causes them to be irrelevant because they're unwilling to compromise. They're unwilling to see good ideas and come to middle grounds because they're so stuck on these key things. Now, this makes me different than some of those hardline libertarians, but I believe that I got into the party to push the agenda of incrementalism, compromise, and rational thought. So you can... Incrementalism. If you can work with Republicans and Democrats to achieve good stuff, that's what we're looking for. We don't want to sit around and just speak principle, and have nothing done. We want to use our resources to help people on both sides of the aisle accomplish things we believe empowers the American people. And
advances our principle.
And advances the principle, even if it's not to the purest degree, to the extreme that some of these people may want it. It's a step in the right direction, and we believe that's better than no step at all.
All right, game of inches.
Exactly, exactly right. It is a huge, that's all politics is. So I would like to kind of plug our website. So if you haven't checked us out at East Tennessee Libertarian Party, you can check us out, etnlp.org. I also run like a media site that kind of tries to promote constitutional content and libertarian leaning content. That's recuro.org. We spoke about that earlier. And if you're in the Knoxville area, come on out to a meeting. We meet on the last Thursday of every month. And our meeting dates are posted on our website and on our Facebook page.
Follow the page.
Yeah. We're on
Facebook, Twitter.
We're on them all.
Instagram.
That's right. I don't think we're on Instagram, but
Facebook.
That's right. But that's all I've got, unless Justin has anything he wants to add here to the conversation.
I would add that if you are in earshot and you find our ideas appealing and are curious, want to carry the torch or want to yell and tell us how dumb we are, we actually like the banter, and you can find us both on Facebook with our real names, and we both have messengers and all that good stuff. So
and we enjoy arguing.
We
enjoy arguing.
Josh and I argue a lot. There's actually quite a bit of difference between the two of us, despite what it might sound like. We do actually enjoy it. So if we can answer questions, we'd be happy to do so. If we can tell you how to get more involved, we would absolutely love and appreciate your involvement. I mean, it doesn't do it without the people, and that was the founders' idea. And realistically, that's what we set out to push for, was what we interpreted the original idea of the founders as, which is the best we can name for. It's not our idea. We thought they did it best, and we couldn't do it better.
Agreed.
I have one last word on compromise before we go. The greatest document ever created in the history of the world was created from compromise between two groups of people.
Yep.
The United States Constitution.
I agree.
It was not, everybody did not get what they wanted.
Nope.
But we still ended up with the greatest document ever written.
That's right.
And you had two very differing factions in Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Yep. George Washington put both of them on his cabinet so he could hear both sides. Yep. And George Washington did okay. He came out.
Yes, he did.
He came out being a pretty good president.
That's right.
So compromise does work in certain situations. So let's move towards that.
I agree, sir. Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you for having us.
I certainly hope you enjoyed this episode of Kitchen Table Politics. Please give us a follow on Twitter at KTPOLS. That's KT Polls. And check out our website, ktpolitics.com. We'll see you next time.